Welcome to the RecNet Roundtable. My name is Annie Palick. We are here to explore the people and passion behind the recreation and experience industry. This month, we're doing something a little different. I asked 3 of my colleagues to share their origin stories, the moments, jobs, and passions that brought them into this field. Their journeys are as unique as they are, and they prove one powerful truth: success in this industry isn't linear. Whether they started on the front lines or came in through an unexpected side door, their stories reflect the value of experience, adaptability, and above all, passion. Each segment, which are 3, is unique as far as time goes. Let's dive into our first speaker. This section is approximately 21 minutes long.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Steve Geisz. I am currently the general manager here at Eagle Ridge Resort and Spa in Galena, Illinois. And I'm here to tell you my story on how I ended up here. I've been with Eagle Ridge for 3 years, as of last week, actually. So here's my story. I grew up in a small town in Northwest Illinois of about 1,500 people. Graduated from a high school class of 16 people. So I'm happy to say I was in the top 10 in my class. So that makes me feel good. But I was born on a farm in a farming community. We raised pigs and cattle, and my dad sold the farm when I was young, and I went to work for a local farmer who became my best friend, and spent most of my high school time working in agriculture. So as I get close to graduating high school, I was picking colleges and picking my future, and really didn't have much of a plan. But decided to follow in my father's footsteps and join the military. So I enlisted in the United States Army and became a combat engineer, which is they call a 12 Bravo. Basically, what that job is blowing things up using a lot of explosives. So I enlisted in the Army. I spent 2 years in active duty, and then the remaining 6.5 years I spent in the Army Reserves. But during that time, I went to college at Western Illinois University in Macomb. I'm proud to say that I had the tutelage. I was under the tutelage of Andy Holtnack, who's one of my mentors and heroes in this association, and we might work our way back to him as we end. But going to Western, I didn't really have an idea. I just got out of the military. I served for 1 year overseas in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait in Desert Storm. So I just was happy to be out back in the normal civilization and not over in the desert. So I didn't really have an idea. But I was always a good chemistry person, chemistry and biology, and I knew I wanted to be in the outdoors. So I went to Western Illinois and took up a major in chemistry and biology, and that lasted for about 1 year, maybe shorter. And I decided it wasn't for me, so I hung on to the biology part of it. But then I got introduced to coincidentally, I got introduced to somebody who was part of a recreation club that they did. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. What are you guys doing? Well, we're going out to Hornfield campus, and we're going to be working with kids in the outdoors, and we're going to take them on some trails and kind of doing some interpretation, flowers, trees. And I'm like, yeah, that's my cup of tea. I kind of enjoy that. So got involved in this club, and then in meeting the people in the club, I ended up saying, that's a pretty good. So I ended up switching majors, or putting recreation, park, and tourism as my minor, and so forth. But as the years went on, I ended up making it my major and got a major in biology as well. But that's where I met Dr. Andy Holtnack. My junior year of college, when I switched over, Andy, I took an intro to rec class and then a commercial rec and resort management class from Andy. And that's basically where things changed for me. I'm like, I can go to work at one of these nice places. Of course, everybody in the Midwest wants to go towards the beach. And I wasn't any different. I wanted to go towards the beach and work at big resorts in the ocean. And that was kind of my focus then. And Andy helped guide that way. So I'm forever grateful for putting me in that path, because I stayed on that path after in college, and stayed on that path after college. I had the opportunity before, as most rec majors have to do in 12-week or 13 or 14-week internship. I was no different, and I actually had an opportunity to do two internships, and I did one that kind of started my recreation path, where I got a unique opportunity to work for the Boy Scouts of America, and I took the summer and went down to Isla Mirada, Florida, in the Keys, and became a boat captain for a 41-foot sailboat. Um, and again, not something typical for a Midwestern farm kid, but and my mom will tell you the same story. Like, well, you're gonna do what? You're gonna sail in the ocean. Yeah, I don't even think you've been on a boat before, she said. But became a captain, took the training with the Boy Scouts, and spent the summer, my junior year, in Florida Keys. What I liked about this job and why I bring it up is the fact that it was an interpretation job too. So you got to take week-long trips, teaching Boy Scouts how to sail, how to fish, some camp skills, and kind of introduced me to, I mean, it really was hospitality, but just in a more rougher form, and out on a 41-foot sailboat. But you're responsible for a group of 6 to 8 kids, and no different than running a kids program. We just did it out on a boat. And so it kind of introduced me to that part of hospitality and recreation. It was smack dab in the middle of the Florida Keys, which didn't hurt, but it was an awesome opportunity and kind of got my feet wet in South Florida. When I returned back from that summer program, I was a senior then, and then took an internship the following year to finish up my degree at back home in Lanark, Illinois, at a place called Lake Carroll. It was a property owners association, so I kind of was late in the game and getting an internship, and this one I saw posted on the board, and it happened to be a Western grad that was posting it, and so I called him up and said, this would be great for me. I'm it's close to my family farm. I'm going to be back home for the summer. So long story short, I got an internship, and the basis of this internship was kind of unique. It was to create and start a new recreation program for a property owners association. 4-season resort in Northwest Illinois, but they did not have a rec program. They had a social committee made up of property owners, and they needed some guidance and someone to kind of build it from the start up. So I did that for my internship and turned in the proposal. And then I had a waiting period. I was hoping that obviously I'd be the next director of recreation since I built the program, but it had to get approved through the board of directors. And so during that time, I had the opportunity to leave that property and begin my never-ending job search, or I waited it out and accepted a position as a security officer at night for Lake Carroll while they decided on the proposal for the new recreation program. So it had to get passed through the board of directors. So I saw it as an opportunity to just hang on. And but again, it was I had an overnight shift of driving a security vehicle and maintaining the safety of the property, checking the amenities. Can I say I'm grateful for that? Yeah, I got to know that property inside and out, I can tell you that. So eventually the board approved it, and I became the first director of recreation for Lake Carroll. And that was back in 1991, I think, or 92, which coincidentally, I'll throw that in there, in 1992, in 91, I think I attended my first RCRA back then, or RecNet conference, and it was actually here at Eagle Ridge Resort and Spa. So I made my full circle back, and I mentioned Andy Holnack was a mentor. There's a lady by the name of Wendy Kerr-Price that was in the recreation department here back in 91. And I drove up from Lake Carroll to this meeting here and introduced myself, and she became kind of a mentor. I have lost kind of contact, but I see her on Facebook. But if she ever happens to listen to this, I want to give her a shout out because I met her, and that's how I got involved in RCRA, which is now RecNet. But so from there, I landed at Lake Carroll, got my first job in recreation, and it kind of just started and built a program and got established, started from scratch. Again, but it was a brand new program, so there was very little funding. So I worked with the property owners to get this program off. Then we took over the aquatic complex. So again, I kind of my story has always been about saying yes to opportunities, no matter what they are. And they said, are you interested in taking over and helping us with the aquatic complex? Yes, I said absolutely. Went out and got my certification for being a certified pool operator and aquatic facility operator, and then we built a new aquatic complex. They also had a outdoor and downhill ski hill, snow skiing hill that was operated by volunteers. Again, we saw this as an amenity that could be used at least for the property owners and maybe make it a revenue stream. So they asked if I'd be interested in assisting. So went and took some ski training and some ski lift training, and we opened up the ski hill the following year after my first year. And I think it's still going today as a amenity for homeowners there at Lake Carroll. But how this kind of worked in is I got a little ski experience, and there's a property out in North Carolina called Sapphire Valley Ski Resort or Sapphire Valley Association. It goes by many names. Kind of a property owners association, but also split as a 4-season timeshare. And they had reached out and were interested in someone to take over their amenity program, director of amenities, which included a downhill ski area, a larger one in the Blue Ridge Mountains, just about an hour southwest of Asheville, North Carolina. Anyways, great opportunity. I was young yet, had a young daughter, picked up my family and we moved to the mountains, and beautiful country, but much bigger property, a timeshare organization with a downhill ski area, a very big tennis complex, a large amenity, water park, indoor, outdoor pools, food and beverage operations, completely an upgrade and more responsibility. So I became the director of amenity operations for Sapphire Valley Resort. And that was about in 1992 or 93. I moved there and became the director of amenities and stayed there for about 5 years. Again, a big opportunity, not in my wheelhouse for some things like tennis. Clay tennis courts do not exist very rarely in the Midwest, I can tell you that. But here I am getting 12 clay tennis courts dropped on me, and I had to learn how to maintain them. And so I took a clay tennis court certification, and I bring this up because we learned to maintain our own clay courts. Tennis was very big in North Carolina, especially in that area. And that branched out into, we became actually the tennis court maintenance for the entire area. So there's a couple, 6 or 7 clubs that are located adjacent to our club, and we ended up doing their clay tennis courts, and it became a revenue stream. So again, small farm kid, didn't know a thing about clay tennis courts, and said yes to the opportunity of learning how to do that. So yeah, that keeps that certification still today. Not in much use here back in the Midwest, but it surely served its purpose there. But yeah, I had probably 5 or 6 years at Sapphire Valley Resort. Great opportunity. Again, 4 seasons, so I was able to use my downhill skiing hills. We built a tubing hill, kind of recreated that whole outdoor experience for a small southernmost ski area in the United States. Learned some clay court maintenance, took over their amenity program, and was very successful there. Actually, we've had several people from that resort that have moved on and we're on the board here for RecNet. Years have passed, and so I had a great experience there. Things changed in my life to where I was making another move. Had another opportunity come across my desk. It was to move to Miami, Florida. So I already had a connection in the Keys at one time, and so had an opportunity to take over at the Doral Golf Resort and Spa in Miami, Florida, where I moved and took over as the director of recreation. Again, completely changed from 4 seasons to sunny Miami. But again, an awesome opportunity. 780 room property with a world-class spa, an outdoor complex, a struggling recreation program because they had some turnover. So again, I said yes to the opportunity, and here's where things kind of changed for me. That was right around the 9/11 time. So I was still active in the military, but as a reservist, and 9/11 happened. So things changed in the hospitality and resort industry, where they started to downsize and create and move positions along. So I took over a lot of responsibilities. In our complex, we had 3 food and beverage outlets, and we also had a food and beverage outlet at our spa. And when 9/11 happened, they had downsized and created some space, so they reached out to leaders to see if they would jump on board. And of course, this is where again, part of my motto was saying yes. I took over the food and beverage operations for both aquatic complexes, and I took over leadership of the spa. And again, not 1 ounce of experience, just management experience, but they were looking for someone to just keep the ship and keep the schedules going and be a leader in the spa. And that's where I got my introduction to spa management and learned um, a lot about the spa industry, and did it on the run. And then the opportunity came in our lodging section of the spa that they were down a housekeeping manager. So um, because I was adjacent to the spa, already over there doing the food and beverage, already doing the spa, I jumped on board and became the housekeeping manager for that spa section. About 45 rooms in our spa. Again, never been in housekeeping, never been in a hotel up until this point. And so I agreed to, yes, jumped on board, and then I got a little bit of housekeeping experience, took over the team, learned a lot about guest satisfaction in rooms, about service at a 5-star resort, about cleanliness, things like that. But again, they just needed a leader, and my GM at the time had enough confidence that I could at least keep the ship going, and that's kind of how it fell. So now here you're looking at a director of rec, 2 food and beverage outlets, housekeeping of 45 units, and then and I've just that. And in addition to this, I also took a part-time gig, and I throw this in there just because I think it's cool. But I took a part-time evening gig because of my military experience. My roommate at the time was the director of in-game entertainment for the Florida Marlins, so he needed a pyrotechnic guy, and guess what? I said yes. Yes again, because I had a lot of demolitions experience in the Army, so it was really easy, not a big interview. I came overqualified. And so there, in 2001 and 2003, I was the pyrotechnics for the Florida Marlins. And in 2003, I did the fireworks for the World Series against the Yankees, where the Marlins won. So that's a little check mark and claim to fame there. Took me 3 days to wire the stadium, and on the opening night of the World Series against the Yankees, I was talking to my mom on an old Nextel cell phone. That's how long ago this was. As I'm lighting up the sky and the Jets are going over the jumbotron. So my mom was very proud of her son. But going back to Doral, I spent 7 years at Doral as a director of recreation, and when I left, we had kind of rehired again, so I released my spa duties, but I had 2 years of managing a spa, which I'll never regret, because it gave me a lot of experience and kind of moves into where I'm at today. Um, but from Miami, I kind of missed my Midwestern roots, and an opportunity came up to take over as a GM. So I've been in recreation most of my career, and then I had an upgrade to go to a property that we're looking for a water park manager and GM. And it was a 193 unit place on the Mississippi River, not too far from my hometown, and I moved to Dubuque, Iowa, in around 95, 96, or excuse me, around 2004. I moved there to Dubuque and became the GM. Spent almost 20 years as a GM of that property. Again, how did I get to become a GM from a recreation director? They were looking for somebody that could take over a 193 room hotel, water park experience, housekeeping experience, and food and beverage experience. Well, I had all of those, and it's just due to my time in Miami. So I came to that property, and it was connected to a very large 180,000 square foot conference center, which has been the host, 2-time host for RCRA and RecNet um, conferences. But I spent almost 20 years at that property, and it was doing the GM responsibilities, and not a whole lot of recreation, but we did institute some with the water park, and moved on. From there, I bring this up as where I'm at today. My whole entire life, when I lived in the Midwest, came back for holidays, things like that. I always had my eye on Eagle Ridge. It was a premier property. And I was like, even when I was a kid and met, right out of college and met Wendy Kerr Price, I'm like, man, this would be an awesome resort to end up at if I ever get back to the Midwest. And so 3 years ago, fortunate enough, a recruiter reached out to me and said they're looking for somebody with resort experience, spa experience, food and beverage. Again, because of my opportunities to say yes and and do jobs that others didn't want to do, led to me to be getting to what I think is hopefully my ending career job here at Eagle Ridge Resort, where I'm currently the general manager, have been for 3 years. It's a booming property. We're rebuilding, reinvesting some monies into amenities and bringing our golf is world class, 63 holes of golf here. We've got riding stables. We've got a 250-acre lake with a small marina that we operate. We've got a brand new year-old 12,000 square foot stone drift spa, which to me rivals any spa in the Midwest. We're making our mark, um, doing some things that a lot of people in the area aren't doing. We've got a Mashiatsu studio, which is the popular foot massage. We're the only one in the area that does it. We just literally launched our head spa program. So a lot of new things. I love Eagle Ridge and its innovation, a willingness to be innovative, and kind of move in the direction. So that is my story. Hope you've enjoyed it. I think I've been very fortunate. So thank you very much for letting me share.
Gosh, isn't Steve the best? Thanks, Steve, if you're listening. We really appreciate you sharing your story. I think I definitely took from that to just keep saying yes to different opportunities, even the most unusual and strange ones, because you never know down the road how it's going to help you. And maybe you too one day will become a GM or the owner of your own company. Um, our next speaker, I know very well because he's actually my boss at the Mohonk Mountain House. This next segment is 60 plus minutes long. He is a chatty guy, but it is definitely worth the listen. So if you need to take a break from this podcast, certainly give us a pause. If not, keep going if you're listening to us in the car or out for a run. Um, and I hope that you enjoy it just as much as I did.
Good afternoon. My name is Alex Sherwood. I'm the Director of Hotel Operations here at Mohonk Mountain House. I am currently in my 26th year working at the Mountain House. So if I were to go retrospectively and think about how this all started, it would take me back quite a ways. I would say that really starts for me probably somewhere in the early part of high school age. I enjoyed downhill skiing tremendously, enough so that I kept saying, man, I got to do this all the time. And quite frankly, when I was in the early part of high school, I did not want to go to college. I thought I wanted to move out west and become a ski bum. Unfortunately, but fortunately for me, my parents weren't okay with that. So they encouraged me to think of things differently. And as they said, follow your passion and the rest will take care of itself. So for me, I started thinking like that, but I wasn't totally sure. Simultaneously, I was also a runner and ran both cross country and track in high school, which is something I was super passionate about and really still to the day enjoy. So my college path got sort of directed a little bit with running as a focus, as well as finding some school. But the truth be the truth, in order to get in good graces of my parents, I thought I should maybe give up on the dream of being a ski bum and do something like the rest of my family does. For me, that meant my father was a hospital CEO. My stepfather was a dentist. My mom worked for an orthopedic surgeon. So I thought, gee, I probably should do something in that world. So I thought about physical therapy. So I ended up applying and getting into Lock Haven University, which is a small Division II state school in the state of Pennsylvania, which is where I grew up. And I ended up at Lock Haven. When I got to Lock Haven, I was enrolled first in their physical therapy program. And like every college freshman, the anxiety of being away from home for the first time, managing that, as well as college athletics, everything was a little overwhelming, but what I did learn very quickly, and when I say quickly, I mean probably within the first few weeks, was physical therapy was going to be terrible. And why would anyone want to do that? So no offense to physical therapists out there, but and fortunately for me, right around the exact same time, I met a woman who was a professor in the world of recreation. Her name was Judy Ness. And no, I just mixed two doctors. Holy cow, think about that. Actually, Judy Elliott, Roseanne Neff, sorry. Yes, Judy Elliott was a professor that I met, and she was a professor of recreation. And I went, wait a minute, you're a professor of what? And she said, well, recreation. Have you ever thought about a career in that? And I kind of scratched my head and I said, well, I really like to ski. She said, well, resorts are always looking for people. And I went, there's a recreation degree, like a college degree? Absolutely. So I literally that day ran over to the office where you needed to change your major. I did that without talking to my parents. And I was super psyched because it was the person, and that was the difference. I met Judy. Her energy was ripping through the roof, and you're just like, I got to be around that person. And so I had to make the phone call, called my mom and my stepdad. I like to say that they might be a little bit more, I don't want to say understanding, because not that my dad wasn't understanding, but I lived with my mom and my stepdad, and so they knew what was in my brain, I think, more frequently. And then I had to call my dad. And I remember calling my dad and saying, hey, I declared my major today. And he was all excited. And he said, well, yeah, well, of course. What did you declare? I said, well, I actually declared my major. I'm going to be a recreation major. And there was a pause at the end of the phone. And I didn't hear anything. And I thought he'd actually hung up. And he's like, recreation? What's that? And I said, well, yeah, there's this lady I met. And you could just hear like the skepticism in his tone of voice back. But nonetheless, I finished my freshman year, and that kind of got me rolling into the world. The cool thing for me, Lock Haven's program required that we do multiple internships while we were in school. And one of the things that was really critical early on was learning about networking and membership to associations and things like that. And that's where I was introduced to RCRA, Resort and Commercial Recreation Association. So I think I noted that probably somewhere in late 94, early 95. Is when I was introduced, and I learned about things called national conferences. And I understand that conferences were all these like-minded people coming together, and not only did they share and sort of do some education, but that was also a place to do job fairs and look for internships, because my criteria at school was going to be that I needed to do 2 internships before I graduated. So I had 3 years before I would graduate if I was going in 4 years, and I would have to do 2 internships. And that's where the game became incredibly real for me. I have a somewhat competitive side from time to time. And the goal was, how do you best ready yourself for a real world job? So for me, I went to, I think my very first RCRA, if I remember, it was actually at what is known as Nemacolin Woodlands. I went there as a student. I had an amazing experience there. I met a guy by the name of Bruce Bolivar. As many of us might know that guy. There are legends. And then there are legends. And what I kept learning was all these different legends. I heard about this guy named Bruce, then I heard about a couple different other names, and there were some big ones. One of those big ones was a woman by the name of Heidi Jewett, but at that time it kind of went one ear and out the other, and she was at some resort in New York State. I also knew about Dylan Jones. I knew about Dave Huntner. I knew about Lisa Linden. A lot of people like that. I was but a young lad who was aspiring to maybe someday make a name for myself. So I went to that conference, had a really cool experience. I started to see things line up. From there, I was able to find, oddly enough, an internship in Western Pennsylvania at a ski resort. And that was my first dose of quote unquote working for a ski resort, although I had started to teach skiing when I was in high school. So I guess I technically had already done that. But I worked in the summertime. And so I worked at a place called Hidden Valley. And I ran kids programs, and I did like 18 weeks worth of kids programs. And it was a situation where there was a lot of second home owners that had houses at this property, and I ran a program for kids. What I learned, and they always tell you it's not always the great stuff. What you sometimes learn is what you know you're not going to be really good at. What I learned after 18 weeks of doing a kids camp there is I was not very good at that, and that I would never ever want to run a kids program. And anyone that can do that is amazing compared to me. I had my own time with that, but it was a good lesson learned. I met some unique people. I had a fellow internship who ironically, for later in the story, was a classmate of a future co-worker of mine many years later, who pretty important person that I've brought into my life, which is pretty cool. And ironically, that same person had a professor. This individual went to Robert Morris, which is a school in Western PA. His other classmate, ironically, turned out to be my first boss at Hidden Valley. So there were some connections all of a sudden. So then I went back to school, and I knew that if I really want to be ahead of the game, instead of just doing 2 internships like school required, I thought it'd be cool to do a third one. And so for me, I was interested in trying to find something. So this would have been probably right around 1996. I was able to secure and find an internship in Colorado, which led me to move to Summit County, Colorado. I got to work at then Keystone Resort, which was also Keystone, Arapahoe Basin, and Breckenridge were all one big entity back then, owned by Ralston Purina. And I will never forget, that was a moment for me. And it's funny, people talk about recreation professionals, and it's always about, your energy, your who you know, how you know, and everything like that. Well, this was before this format. Zoom did not exist, if you can imagine, in 1996. So you did phone interviews. I was in Pennsylvania. These people were in Colorado. At the time, I was living with 5 of my fellow teammates on the cross-country team, which consisted of 5 guys. So if you can imagine what a house with 6 college-age kids looks like, it was not tidy nor well kept. And I knew that I was going to have a phone interview at a certain date and time. So what I remember vividly was trying to be prepared and make sure that I made the right impression, which involved making sure that none of my roommates got involved in that in any way, shape, or form. So I went to all of their guests, their rooms, and I removed their telephones. I remember doing that, and making sure that way no one picked up the phone inadvertently while I was on this. And then I was afraid and freaked out enough that I actually put on a suit and tie for a phone interview in 1996. Remember, no one could see you. So I was sitting in my room amongst t-shirts and running shoes, and I had put notes up on the walls, reminding myself to try to speak slowly and to articulate and make sure I didn't babble, kind of like I am right now. And I used those cues, and I did a phone interview with 2 individuals. And I will never forget Liz Duxbury and Kelly McTurn-Byrne were 2 amazing ladies who, again, gave me the reassurance of what I had chosen was going to be right, because what I thought was going to be a really stiff, hard interview, challenging questions, and not getting a lot of feedback was just the opposite. These were 2 amazing professionals who, just their approachability for a kid who was as young as I was, again, set the tone for me and reminded me that maybe I had actually found something that I really, really liked. So long story short, got that internship, and yay, I'm moving to Colorado to go to the big ski resort. I was super psyched, super proud. Told mom and dad. They were supportive, so much so that they helped fund me enough money so that I could make sure I had a place to stay, make sure the car that I was going to drive across the country was going to make it there. Loaded all of my worldly belongings up, and I moved to Colorado. I remember arriving in Colorado sometime in early May. In Summit County, there was like 28 inches of snow on the ground. But I got there, and one of my favorite stories there was when I did arrive. At the time, I had a goatee, and I had to make sure I had collared shirts. I had read all this, and I was prepared. But when I walked in to sign in, the woman from HR at Keystone looked at me with a confused look, and I said, "I'm here. I'm the new internship in recreation." And she said, "No, you're not." I said, "Excuse me?" And she said, "You're not going to work here with a goatee." And I went, "Oh, geez." Well, I of course thought I didn't have a job. So I was like, how did I make that wrong turn? And so I learned about the dress standard at Keystone at the time, which was men were not allowed to have facial hair. So needless to say, I was off to the store to get a razor and making sure that that was gone. And I spent the summer in Colorado, and it was amazing. I had an absolutely incredible experience. The 2 ladies that I had the chance to work for really gave me the opportunity to explore and grow. The cool thing is I didn't have to do anything for school. I had to write no paperwork, nothing like that. I didn't do anything formal. I just experienced everything, and I did that. So much so that I got to the point where I said, you know what? I don't need to graduate. I'm going to stay here. I tried making that phone call, and I think my mother's encouragement included a lot of curse words, which kept me agreeing that I will go back for my senior year. But this was probably end of August, early September. I was heading back. I had already started to figure out like what the game plan was going to be for next year, because next year, being my senior year in college, I needed to have that final internship, which was going to be the most amazing internship ever. And I was concerned about if I would find a job or not. So I started to tap into my resources at Keystone, which were Liz and Jen, and they're like, "You're gonna be great, you'll be fine." I'm like, "I don't know. There's all these, places I've done now, a couple of these ski resorts. I feel like I'm not that well-rounded. I should be more well-rounded. I think I should go south." Everyone goes to the beaches. They go to these, real nice resorts. There's an amazing one in South Carolina called Kiowa Island. The guy that's there, his name's Dylan Jones. He's like the best of the best. Everyone thinks he's awesome. I should go work for that guy. And they're like, "Oh, okay." And I said, "But there's this place in Florida. There's Millie Island. There's all these other resorts down there." And so I had a list of these things I started to figure out. And again, before the internet was what it is, if you were putting a resume or you putting an application, it was like you physically went and did that. I learned that summer about buying resume paper and heavier weight paper and fonts and all this crazy stuff. Like, it's insane. And so I'm spending time learning. I'm literally in like the copy store, and this woman is showing me like the 50 different papers, because I started to write letters to these people a year in advance to say, "Hey, I would like to get an internship next year." And a lot of them, you could tell if they would laugh. If they could laugh on paper, they would. Like, "Why are you calling us now? Like, that's a year away." But I identified that November in Kiowa Island, oddly enough, was going to be the RCRA National Convention. So I had told them, and when I say told them, I told Liz and Jen that, "Hey, there's going to be this national conference there. They do this job fair. I think you have to like get selected. There's some sort of weird like lottery/draft, and I don't know if I'll make it to the draft. How do I make myself better for the draft? So these people will at least give me an interview to give me a chance, And I'm a million miles an hour. They're like, "You need to settle down." And I was worked up. So I get back to school in September to November. I was prepared. I had been writing letters, letting people know I was coming to that conference. And I was so focused on making sure that I was able to get myself an interview with one of these quote unquote Southern resorts, because I thought that was the way to become a good recreational professional. Then I went to Kiowa. Myself and I think about 6 other classmates from my recreation group came down, and we got all settled in, and which is beautiful. It's incredible and everything like that. And the opening session that day, I honestly can't say I remember who the person was that was speaking. He was loud and obnoxious, just the way I am. And he was, talking about how important, energy, this, that, blah, blah, blah. But then he had a moment, and I'm sitting in this room with all these recreational professionals. And, everyone's rah-rahing and everyone's cheering. And, it's like the adults are more rowdy than the kids. So like, again, I'm reassuring myself that, wait a minute, these are like quote unquote professionals, and they seem like they're like a really fun group of people. And I started to feel, again, really at home. And for me, I remember part of the speech, the gentleman said, "Oh, well, later today, we're going to do a luncheon. And the luncheon we're going to do is a professional meets student luncheon. So what we're encouraging is a student eats lunch with a professional." And, and then you're like in one ear, out the other, like, yeah, okay. Like there's, some adult wants to sit here and eat with me, that's going to be painful for them. But they're going to do it because that's what they do. And they finish that session, and everyone breaks, and all these people are running around. There's a lot of people who haven't seen each other for a couple of years. They're hugging and blah 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 blah. And so the mass of people starts to move out into the lobby. And I say that I mentioned there was all these really, the only way I could say it was they were famous people when I was a kid, were all these directors of recreation. And that was something that just sounded amazing to me. Like, the title director of recreation just sounded like a job that was really cool. But it wasn't always, running a ski resort. Like, I wanted to be a ski bum. By this point, I'd evolved, said, "I'm going to own a ski resort. I'm going to run a ski resort. I'm going to do it that way." But I knew these names, and I had mentioned that that name Heidi Jewett had been in my head once, because while I was in school, I saw a picture of a place called Mohawk Mountain House, and they talked about this famous director of recreation who was on the cutting edge of everything. Again, I had no image of who or what Heidi Jewett was. Well, As I moved into the lobby at that RCRA convention, I was talking to somebody, meeting them, blah, blah, blah. And I literally turned over to like walk away. And when I did it, I smacked into this person and knocked them on their ass. And when I say they were literally on the floor, I was mortified because I just literally like knocked this woman over. And I look over and I see a name tag that says Heidi Jewett. And the exact words, which I'm probably not supposed to curse on this, but was, "Holy shit, you're Heidi Jewett." And I panicked and I said, okay, I could turn around and run away and just go hide. And I figured that was a very viable option. Or I picked this woman up and helped dust her off and introduce myself, which is what I did. And I apologized. And she was hilarious, first of all. And she's like, "Wow, you packed quite a punch." And she's like, "I'm not some small person." And I was like, okay, that's way more information than I thought I needed. And she says, "Hey, did you have somebody you're going to eat lunch with yet?" And I kind of forgot about the lunch with a mentor type thing. And I said, I don't. And so I said, well, let's go to lunch. Well, the one thing you have to know about Heidi is she was a former, a past president of RCRA. And again, it's kind of like walking around with any political figure. Everyone says hello to that person. And of course, what she's doing while she's doing that, she's introducing me to all these other people who I don't know who any of these people are. I'm still embarrassed that I knocked this woman over. I sat down, ate lunch with her. If you've ever met Heidi, you know what her energy is like. If you haven't met her, I would encourage you to somehow learn about this woman. She was absolutely incredible. And I'm halfway through lunch. She introduced me to her, I guess as she would call them, right-hand man, which was what was called the activities manager at the Mountain House at the time. He happened to be from Pennsylvania, which is where I was from. He had gone to Robert Morris, which he knew this guy I told you before that I knew. And now all of a sudden there's this connection. And they asked me, what was I there for? And I said, well, I had told them about how I was trying to get an interview to go to Kiowa or all these other places. And they're like, "Oh, well, we can introduce you, blah, 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 blah." And fine, it was all niceties and everything. But by the time lunch ended, I had this like confliction, which I had just spent a year and a lot of time and money buying paper for resumes, which was stupid. And I said, I don't want to go to the South. I want to work for her. And that was it. And I remember panicking because my game plan had just blown up because I thought I wanted to do this. And I had wrote all these people telling them I couldn't wait to meet them. And I was so excited to hopefully get a chance to talk to them and interview, blah, 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 blah. I did all that crap. And I had to call my mom. I had an AT&T phone card. So again, no cell phones. I had to use a little thing that like a credit card. You punch in a number, which basically charges the thing. And I call my mom and she's like, "What's wrong? Her first question was, did I get arrested? Like, do I look like the kind of kid that would get arrested?" Anyways, I said, "No, but I think I don't want to go here anymore." So what are you talking about? I'm like, "I don't want to come to the South anymore." I said, "I met this woman and she's from New York." My mother, of course, being from Western PA, was like, "You want to go to New York?" Like, ugh. And I was like, "I think so." Well, ironically, right after that conversation happened, Heidi approached me and said, "Hey, Aaron and I were talking, I know you said you're really interested. Would you consider coming to New York?" And I was like, oh. And I didn't want to I didn't want to be like, yeah, I was like, holy crap, like this might actually work out. So what happened was there was a draft, and I apologize, this story might not make a ton of sense now. There's a draft at RCRA where all the professionals and the properties get together and they get all these resumes from all these potential applicants, and then everyone decides who they would like to try to interview. And so they essentially, the cool thing is all of us got a chance to get interviewed, which was another reason to show up because you get an exposure to that. And I had got myself some interviews, and I had gotten enough interviews that filled, quote unquote, the timetable. But what that meant was I didn't have one because I didn't formally give one to Mohawk, which was weird. And so now I was breaking the rules because you're not supposed to have interviews outside of that, which is, I'm saying this in front of a freaking president of RCRA. I can't believe I'm saying this. I broke the rules here. And that was, they, quote unquote, set an interview up for me, Heidi and Aaron did, after all those others were done. And I left there saying I'm going to New York to go work for this person, and I'm going to be at Mohawk Mountain House. So that's November of 1997. I graduated from Lock Haven in the spring. No, excuse me, that would have been the fall of 96. There it is. Fall of 96. I graduated in May of 97 from Lock Haven, and then I had to do my internship. So I literally graduated on a Saturday, and I started my internship at Mohawk 2 days later. And I came to Mohawk. I was a recreation intern at the time. The recreation interns here at that time were quote unquote just employees who made less money than all the other employees, which I didn't understand that. We've come so far in that world. It's so good. But what was cool about it is you got to work in all the different areas. And when we say that, I worked as a lifeguard at the beach. I got to work in boat dock. I worked in the kids program. I worked at tennis. I did campfires. I did things like that. I didn't get to lead hikes then. They didn't trust me yet for that, but they let me take care of kids for some reason. And I spent the summer doing that. And for me, the one thing that was a real challenge was I had just come from Colorado, where I worked for these two individuals who gave me a lot of autonomy, and I was one of one. And so when like cool stuff was going on, if there was big events, I was always at those things, and every day I did something different. And one was just more challenging, or I led a team building. I was 20 years old then. I wasn't even 21. I wasn't legal to drink. I had to lead a team building event for Disney Imagineers. Those are the people at Disney that actually freaking make all the stuff. I had to lead and I remember, like, I'm talking to like a guy who's as old as me now, who's like 50 years old, and I'm trying to like teach him how to find his spiritual world, right? Like that blew me away. I came to Mohawk and I spent my first 26 days on the boat dock. As a thing, I remind myself, I still have the journal that I had to keep for school, and every day you had to write a journal about what you learned. And by day 5 or 6, there was a lot. I hate this place. This is stupid. Why am I here still? I can't believe I'm still on this boat dock. I put people into boats and I take them out of boats. That's what I do. I put them in, I put them out, I put them in. That's all I do. That's kind of what I remember from part of that. And I remember it didn't make sense. And then the summer sort of evolved, and things, you start to do some cooler stuff, and you got to see some, of the Mohawk magic takeover. And I finished the internship part. My professor came to visit me, I remember, and he'd been reading all these journal entries, and he's like, "Man, you're cranky." And I was like, "Yeah, I know, but because I had so much fun last year, I learned so much, and I don't feel like I'm learning as much." And he's like, "Well, you don't always realize what you're learning, when you're in a system and when you understand it." And he said, "You never know, it might be really valuable for you in the future." And of course, I was 20, whatever, and I scoffed at this guy, like, "You don't know what you're talking about." But I finished my internship here. And again, I really liked Heidi and I really liked Aaron. And I had met another guy by the name of Bob. And Bob was a guy who, oddly enough, had gone to Robert Morris and was classmates with those guys from my first internship. And Bob's a Western Pennsylvania guy. And so now all of a sudden you had someone kind of like you in the same place, kind of, I guess, stuck out here in the sense that we weren't from New York. So we weren't as cool nor as fast as everybody. We certainly weren't as gangster, but we both had a passion for what was happening here and like what was available. And I had learned his course, and he had done a similar situation. He'd done some other internships and had been here a couple years before me as an intern and learned and was moving through. And it was like my first aha moment, like, wait a minute, maybe this is it. Maybe this is a place, but I wasn't sure. At that time, Mohawk did not have a lot of full-time year-round positions in recreation. And the pressure for me coming out of college was about, hey, I need to get a job because I need health insurance. That was the number one thing. It didn't matter. Like, as long as I had health insurance, for some reason that equated to being an adult. For me, I don't know why, that was a hang up. So I couldn't find that, although I had stuck around and like pieced together some hours here. And then eventually I kind of said, well, I got to find a job. So an opportunity for me to move back to Pennsylvania popped up. Again, my running passion was still somewhat of a thing. And if I wasn't going to make it as a resort leader, my fallback plan was I was going to sell running shoes. So it's important to have a fallback plan. And my fallback plan was I was going to be a shoe rep. You thought I was lame before. Now I'm really lame. Like, who wants to sell running shoes? But I did. And I found a job at a sports specialty store that had an incredible running background. And it was opening a new store in the Allentown, Pennsylvania area. And it was a family-owned and operated business. And I had frequented it when I would go visit my father, who at the time was living in Allentown. So what this did is it posed an opportunity for me to move back home to Pennsylvania, but to actually live with my dad. And I had never lived with my dad from when I was 4 years old. So I took that opportunity and moved in with my dad and my stepmom. And again, opportunity that I wasn't counting on. It was probably one of the coolest things ever. I spent about 1.5 years living with my dad, learning a lot, just, kind of seeing things in a different way. But my then girlfriend, now wife, had a semester of school, who then somehow decided to move to Mexico or something like that. So I was extending some time there, but all along I had sort of kept in contact with my friends from Mohawk. Again, it wasn't like you got to see job postings on the internet or anything like that. And I always said that if I had the chance to come back to Mohawk, the one job that really fascinated me when I was here as an intern was this thing called group recreation. And that was a group of individuals that worked with corporate groups. And there was a person, her name was Wendy Mastashani, who was the coordinator at that time. And I always thought her job was cool. So lo and behold, about a year later, maybe a little bit more, I got a phone call from Heidi, and Heidi said, "Hey, we have a job, and it's a full-time year-round job." And I was like, "Does it have benefits?" And they're like, "Yes, it's got medical." I was like, "Yes." And I said, "What's that job?" And she said, "It's running our kids program." And I went, so I hung up the phone and talked to my dad, and I got the lecture about, well, you should, we've got our stepping stones and crap. I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to run a kids program because I'm not good at that. And he's like, "But you've done it." I was like, "Yeah." And I went back and forth. And in my heart, I just knew that probably wasn't going to be the perfect thing for me. But I was torn because I was super afraid that if I called Heidi back and told her no, that I'd be done. And fortunately for me, I called Heidi back and told her no. And again, people there, she said, "I understand." She's like, "I'd rather you be happy doing what you're doing here, and that's what we want you to do, blah, blah, blah." And she said, "We'll keep you posted." I went, "Okay," and hung up the phone. And I assumed that I probably would never hear from her again. Well, a few short weeks later, phone rang, and she says, "Hey, guess what? There's another job, and it's full-time, and it's got benefits." And I went, "Oh, gosh." She said, "But it's not in recreation." And I went, "Ooh, what do you mean it's not in recreation?" She said, "Well, I think it's a job you could do." I said, "What's that?" She said, "It's called the guest relations manager." And I said, "What in the heck is that?" She says, "You got to do a lot of writing. You got to talk to guests when they're not happy." And I was like, "Okay." I was like, well, I was anxious to get back. I certainly felt like I couldn't say no twice. She said, "I can get you an interview with the guy that's in charge of it." That guy was the director of hotel operations. And I said, "Okay." And so I came back and did an interview, came to Mohawk, did an interview with him. And I would say that the interview went well, in the sense that he said, and I quote, "I will see you in 2 weeks when you get back here." And which to me meant you probably have a job. Enough that I actually drove home and stopped and bought a suit and tie that day because I didn't own one. But I was confident, based on what this individual had just told me, that I had a job. So I remember coming home and seeing my mom, or my dad, and my stepmom, and I walked in with a suit, and they were like, "So how'd the interview go?" And I'm like, "Well, I think I got a job." And they're like, "Did they tell you you have a job?" I'm like, "Well, the guy said he'll see me in 2 weeks." And I said, "Oh, okay, but did they give you a job?" I said, "Well, he said he'll talk to me." I said, "Okay." Well, the suit hung on a hanger for a while, and the phone didn't ring. It didn't ring. And of course, now I felt like an idiot. And the pressure was there, but not really. My dad was kind of cool. And I didn't hear anything. A couple weeks went by, and I called Heidi. And I said, "Hey," and you could hear her go like, I'm like, "I haven't got a phone call, but I was pretty sure." She's like, "Yeah, there might have been some stuff. Let me," and I was like, "Oh boy." She said, "I'll call you back." So 3 or 4 days later, she called me back. She said, "Listen, there's a situation here. There was a job that someone took that they realized they weren't going to be able to fulfill. So they gave that job to that guy, and you're out of a job." And I was like, "But I bought a suit." I was all set. I had my suit ready to go. And so I was bummed. I was a little bit upset, but I was bummed. That's also fun for the future. As a note, I'll tell you about that later. But so again, in a whirlwind of all this, I thought for sure things were done at home. I continue to work, enjoy the family that I was working for. Successful, it was good. My then girlfriend, then wife, was coming home from Mexico. Somewhere in that world, I made the decision that I wanted to get married, which was crazy. Can't imagine that. I still kind of wonder how that all came together in my brain. And so got engaged, didn't have a job still. Well, I had a job, but not one of these jobs. And then lo and behold, the phone rings again, and it's Heidi, and she says, "Hey, there's another job." And I was like, "Oh yeah?" And she says, "It's the group rec job." And I was like, "Oh, the job?" And they're like, "Yeah, the guy who was running group rec for us, he just became the activities manager, and there's a void." I'm like, "Sweet." And she's like, "But you have to do an interview." And I'm like, "Okay, well, like, And she's like, "No, you got to interview with him." And I'm like, but yeah, okay, whatever, I'll be there. So I drive 2.5 hours back up here, comes here to do an interview. I meet the guy. His name was Mr. Dion. I was introduced to Mr. Dion with Heidi on one side of me and Bob on the other side of me, who both know me and know me pretty well. And they basically fed me to the shark. They didn't break the ice, they didn't do anything. They just gave me to this guy who was holding a clipboard, 3 pens. He was not laughing at anything. He had a really bad hairdo. And I was like, wait a minute, this does not strike me as a recreation person, like what I knew a rec person was. And sure enough, I sat through an interview, which was about 45 minutes to an hour long. And it was horrible. It was all the questions that you would expect a lame person to ask you, about where you see yourself in 5 years, and all this crap. And are you an introvert or an extrovert? All this weird stuff. And I'm like, this guy's a stiff. So I wasn't confident, but I just kept hoping in my back of my mind. I'm like, hopefully Heidi and Bob will put a good word in. And so I didn't know. I did the interview, and apparently I think there was only one other person applying for this job. So it wasn't like this major pool of individuals. So I had a 50-50 shot, more or less. And I was breathing. So I figured I was up. And I eventually got the phone call that I got the group rec job. And I started that in the summer of 1999. And I came back, and then I was what's called the group recreation coordinator. So I was now a coordinator. I couldn't coordinate my own clothes, but I was a coordinator. And I got to do all of the corporate recreation and team building that happened here at the Mountain House. And it involved working with different people at different times of the year. And we had some seasonal jobs that would float into that. And I did that job for a number of years. And then along the way there, oddly enough, I met someone who's pretty important in the world of RecNet now, who was then an activities person. Her name was Annie Pillock, aka Annie Miskell back then. And as I told you, myself and Bob are from Pennsylvania. We were laid back Pennsylvania folks. Annie was not. She was from Long Island. Her and another individual, her name was Felice DeGennaro, were both from Long Island. And I was safe to say I was afraid of both of them because they were really tough individuals. Neither of them were actually mean or tough people, but man, they were scary. So I met a lot of people along that path. From the group coordinator job, what happened was I kept wanting to try to do some different things. Eventually, what Heidi found for me was an opportunity to merge my group rec experience with the sales team at Mohawk. And I wasn't a sales guy, but apparently I am a sales guy. And they created a position then referred to as the group recreation sales manager. So I got a little bit of like a step, if you will, in that role, which was really cool. And that got me a chance to travel around and see some stuff and do some things. But I was very much in the heat of rec, which was really cool. And at that point in my brain, I had always said that, along the path of hopefully someday, maybe I could do something cool, and maybe I'll run a hotel. But if I'm going to do it, I want to come from a rec background, because I believed, after watching and learning a lot of stuff, that as much as hoteliers will tell you that, people come to hotels because the rooms are amazing or the food's awesome, I have a much more blunt opinion about that. I think food and sleep are two things that you are required to do to live. If you don't eat food, you die. So you can give me really good food, but it's like I have to do it. I don't have a choice, right? Like I have to eat or I die. And the same is true about sleep. If I don't sleep, you die. Like you can't stay up inevitably forever. So I always hated that opinion, and I always hated hearing hoteliers and hospitality, people that go to school. I always felt that recreation was the reason people choose to go where you go. If you ask someone about what they're doing for vacation, sure, they want a place that has nice beds and they have great food, but they're going where they go because of the recreation that they're going to do. And the recreation might be, I'm going to sit on the beach and do nothing. That's cool. But recreation is the reason. That's the aha moment for me. That's the moment that always struck me as important. So I kept saying, well, how do you push that forward? How do you make sure that people have a respect for recreation that they should? Because just like when I called my dad and told him I was a rec major, and there was that pause, not that it was disrespectful, but you could tell that it wasn't like his son calling to tell him he was going to be a doctor or he was going to be a lawyer. He was going to be a rec major. What the heck's that? So with that in my brain, it became a thing of like, how do you make this more legit? How do you do that? And the natural step for me, which I thought was ultimately the top of the line at first, was going to be, what about director of recreation? And at that point, for me, like anyone, I got here, I didn't think I was going to be here that long. I thought I'd be here a couple of years. I'd learn, I'd do the little steppy step thing, and then, maybe I'd go somewhere else. But for me, what happened was, it was the people. And it was the Heidis of the world and other people here that sucked you in. And it's like, it's a bad drug. Like, you got addicted to those people. And it started to be something that even when I was doing group rec and I would debrief and talk to people, and I'd always say, like, why do you do what you do? And the number one thing for me was always about the people I had the chance to work with. And the day that I don't like that anymore is the day that I know I need to go on. And that has served me well. Oddly enough, I'm still here. So what that meant was, from the world of group recreation sales manager, in a somewhat, I'll call it startling, I guess, turn of events, Heidi decided to retire, which was unsettling, because if there ever was a mother hen or someone that looked after you, she became sort of a parent figure in a lot of ways for me, even though she doesn't have children of her own. She has some amazing black labs. She would much rather have those than kids. She would tell you that. She was great, right? She always, you could always be real with her. You could always talk to her. I never had to worry about watching my mouth when I spoke to her, because she knew I was anxious to learn and I would do whatever, she needed me to do. And she decided to retire. She had a family situation cooking, where she was taking care of an uncle, and abruptly left Mohawk. And when she did that, which is not what anyone expected, because being the director of recreation at Mohawk, that didn't seem like it would ever be a possibility, because as far as I'm concerned, Heidi was going to live forever, and she would have been doing that job forever. But now all of a sudden there was two things. Like, I definitely didn't think I was capable to fill her shoes. I think there was a lot of apprehension and concern about that. But the one thing that I will say that spurred me along was when I started to think about who I would have to work for and who was going to be my boss. That also was really good motivation. And that was, there were some people, nothing against, but that I knew that were applying, and I just went, nope, can't do that. And so that was sort of motivation to apply to see what my chances were. And lo and behold, the individual that I did the interview with, then referred to, I think, as director of hotel operation. I don't know if he had that title officially. First I think he was actually the director of the spa and the director of recreation or something like that. And then he had a spa director and a rec director on an open space. His name was Paul. Paul was the chump who took the guest relations manager from me. When he was working at Mohawk, he had been working in room service. He took a job in the sales department. If you can follow this, he took that job, but he had 3 young children at the time, and the sales job required the sales agents to travel. He couldn't do that, and that's what the panic was. And so they gave him the job of guest relations. So I learned that the guy who is now interviewing me was the guy who took the job that I was supposed to have, and I was going to have to work for him. So I did that interview, and I shared that with him, and I told him, he asked me something I didn't know about me. I said, I don't like you because you took the job I was supposed to. And he kind of sat back in the seat, and we had known each other for a while, so it wasn't like it was really a bad thing. So I became director of recreation. I was super excited about it, because at that time in my life, that was sort of the big goal, or at least I thought it was the big goal. So excited that I got pulled over by the local police going home the day they called me down to tell me I got the job. We have a hill that comes off the mountain. You're supposed to go 45 miles an hour, and I got clocked 72 miles an hour. And when the officer pulled me over, he said, do you know why I pulled you over? And I said, I do. And he said, you were going fast. I was like, yeah, but I just got a brand new job. I'm the new director of recreation at Mohawk Mountain House. So yes, I was excited about that job. And then for me, the reality set in, and that was that job, as much as it's like what you thought you wanted, you got a lot of stuff that you might not have thought about. And for me, that had a lot to do with responsibility, and immediately no longer being concerned just about yourself and your own progression, but you now had a lot of other people that you have to concern yourself with, worry about, and somehow be an example and help. And that whole thing was weird. For me, I had a lot of people that I worked with, who I was friends with, who I knew, and I now all of a sudden was their boss. people with more experience and knowledge than me, people with more time than me, people who were scarier and tougher than me, all those kind of things. And I guess I sum up remembering that the first 2 years of being director of recreation, I hated it. Nobody knew that, because I think on the outside it's easy to say this is an awesome job, and it is. The place is great. But I was miserable because I wasn't sure that I was good at it, number one. Number two, and just sort of managing all that stuff. I made a commitment to myself that you show up every day, you do the work you're supposed to do, and it will, as my mother and my stepfather always told me, if you follow it, it will figure itself out. And fortunately for me, a lot of those situations figured themselves out, and they figured themselves out in a good way. And that job lasted for a while. That job, I think I was a director of recreation for about 7 years, maybe a little bit more. And what came of me at that time was, and what happened was, I went from being not so psyched and worried, and then I found a job and I really liked it, really liked it, really liked it. And then all of a sudden I saw things changing, and I was, as I said, I was not afraid of my job. And that was something that I think I've used a lot, was always, and some people look at it, when I've talked about it in the past about being afraid of your job, it was about being good at the job and doing it well, and having a little trepidation about that, which is what motivates you, right? I said that's the competition. I was always fearful about that, about being afraid of the job, and I was starting to lose the fear of that job. And that concerned me, because my number one goal here at Mohawk was, I don't want to become, and I'm laughing because I'm looking at myself with a gray face. Oy, oy, oy. I don't want to become one of those people that does a job just because, right? At one point, you're gonna reach that, and I don't want to just cash it in. I saw people around me here in this organization that, in my opinion, were filling space, and I didn't want that to be a thing. So, like, you got to make sure you keep pushing. And for me, that coincided around the time that we saw an organizational shift here at Mohawk, which was pretty interesting. That involved our president hadn't yet stepped down, but we were moving new leadership in. So we had a new general manager come in, we had a new, then became an AGM, president ultimately left. So there was an opportunity for a director of hotel operations position. And that was probably the ultimate question or test, which was, do you have what it takes to do that? And here I was, all along telling yourself that was the goal, that's where you want to be. But in the back of your head, you're saying, hey, I'm just this recreation kid that maybe I didn't go to a big hotel school, or maybe I didn't wear suit and ties all my life, but I feel like I understand the product here. I feel like I know the people, and I think I know what the mission is. And so I felt like that was enough to put your hat in the ring. And fortunately for me, that led to my current role as director of hotel operations here at Mohawk Mountain House. And it is now going on, I dare say, almost 10 years, I think. I looked back there, you can't see in this blurry thing, and you can't see any of this, you're just hearing a voice, but there's a picture back here. Actually, you know what? I'll read it. It's just kind of hilarious. So actually, yeah. So this hangs in my office on the back thing, and it's from a coworker that I work with routinely now. He's actually, I think, what we refer to as our training manager, and it was dated June, oddly enough, of 2015. So yeah, 10 years ago. Holy crap. It says, Alex, he said, you make a pretty damn good director of hotel operations. Pretty in quotation marks because of the bow ties. He said, good or damn good in quotations, as a result of your efforts. And then it says, I'm dating this for the slim chance that you blow it, and you won't be able to just do that. So he reminded me not to blow it. So that thing's 10 years old, and here we are a lot of years later. I'd love to say that, like, the journey for me had anything to do with me. When I look back at this thing so far, I've been crazy fortunate, and it had a lot to do with places like RCRA back then, the people that I've met, More recently, in the current world, the people that I get the chance to work with, Annie, who has facilitated this, is our director of recreation and entertainment, is someone that I met 20 plus years ago, is unbelievable, super talented, insanely good at what she does, is the kind of person that should be doing this job or the jobs above me for all intents and purposes. But we have a lot of those people. I've enjoyed still working with people like Bob, my current boss, who is our president of the company. I've known him my whole journey here at Mohawk. So again, they talk about surrounding yourself with good people, and by that, fit in with good people. Do what you have to do that, and you will most likely find yourself in a place that's pretty awesome. And I can tell you that I wouldn't have thought that I was here going on 26 years. I would have never said that as a 20-some-year-old kid. I don't know that I would have done that. For me, I've been able to raise my daughter here in an environment that I think is pretty amazing, and around this, and she gets to see and know those people. And yes, the work's important because that's what we all identify and make ourselves. But I think the overall mission is probably more critical, and making sure that the life balance is there in this profession, in my mind, has left me with a really good balance to life. Times it's not always that way. There's definitely times it sucks and you feel like, yeah, I would love to have a regular Christmas for my kid, not have to see one parent at Thanksgiving or that because we just run around. Yeah, it's not that. It's about the overall quality, and I feel like the world of recreation is just that. I don't ever look back on it, and I don't regret it. So I think that that's my goals in life now is that whenever I do drop dead, that I want the list of would have, could haves, and should haves to be as short as possible. And I don't think I have anything heavy duty here on the world of rec that I regret. I go back, and it's weird now saying this because this year has been a weird year. My stepfather has just passed in January, but I shared a story that happened the first summer I got back here in 1999, and that was in the era of being young and not knowing if recreation was it. Did I make the right choice? Because all these other people, and my stepfather, I remind you, is a dentist, who was a guy who accomplished a lot, and he had everything he wanted materialistically in the world. He all that, he had it all. And as a young kid, he always reminded me that that wasn't what it was about. He said, you got to be really happy with what you do. And I never understood that. And, but I guess I did because it was in the back of my head. And I know towards the end of his career as a dentist, and when I say the end, I tell you the last 15 or 20 years of his career, he didn't like it. He had built himself up as a person that he had to enjoy, and he was he was on stage, he had to do all those things, but as I always said, all he ever wanted to do was have a ponytail, pierce his ear, and get a tattoo. And for some reason, he felt that as a dentist in Western Pennsylvania, he couldn't do those things. I don't know why. And so he and my mom were here visiting, and I brought them out to a place here called Eagle Cliff. And it was on the end of Eagle Cliff where we were sitting in what we call a summer house, which is like a little gazebo. And you're looking westerly, and you're watching the sun go down. And it's pretty amazing. If you ever get a chance to come to Mohawk, go check out Eagle Cliff. But the sun's going down, and I remember him with his big bushy beard, stroking his beard, and he starts nodding his head. I'm like, oh boy, something big's coming. You can hear it. And Doc's words to me, he's like, let me get something straight. He's like, I go to work every day, and I look in people's mouths. He said, you come to work every day, and you look at this. And he's referring to that landscape that's out there in this sort of world of rec. He says, you tell me who made the right choice in life. And it was that moment, and that's 20 whatever years ago, that I realized that my choice for recreation was 100% the right thing for me personally. And I'm grateful that it happened. There you go. You said I could talk. I've talked. I wish everyone a great day.
All right. Well, thank you, Alex. We appreciate your time and telling us your story, and of course, all your insights in your 26 plus year career that you've had. Two things that I took from what he was talking about was to be aware if you're not afraid of your job. I thought that was really interesting. I was definitely very afraid of every job I've ever started. And I know that feeling very well, and where he was heading with that. And the other thing he said that I thought was interesting is if you follow it it will figure itself out. And I have a couple projects on the horizon that I've been nervous about, but I find that to be a really great way to kind of feel a little bit more confident about trying something different with these projects. So anyway, I hope that you're still with us and hanging in there. We have one more speaker. This listen is only about 11 minutes long. So if you're still here and listening to us, even though it's short and brief, it's still really fun and interesting. And this next speaker hails from the South. So I'm excited for you to hear what she has to say.
Hey guys, I'm Ashton Jones. I am the activities manager at the Beach Club Resort and Spa located in Gulf Shores, Alabama. So I'm here to talk to you guys, I guess, kind of my career path, how I got here. I have been with the company for 15 years now. So I started after high school. I actually had a full paid scholarship to a community college down here. So I originally thought I wanted to do broadcast journalism, but then when I got the full tier scholarship, so I'm like, what can I do with a hospitality degree? Or what can I do with a 2-year degree? And so I'm from Gulf Shores beaches. So I'm like hospitality. And so I went for the 2 years for hospitality and got my associates. Then I kind of found out that most people at that time wanted you to have a bachelor's degree. So I went ahead from there. I actually transferred to the University of Alabama, Roll Tide. And I went 2 more years and received my bachelor's in hospitality management. It's actually, I guess, restaurants, hotels, and meetings management is actually my degree. And I minored in event planning. And so I originally had in my mind with what I studied, I wanted to do more of, I thought, like meetings and groups. I wanted to do conventions. So since I wasn't in recreation, I honestly, at the time I went to school, I'd never even heard of recreational kind of hospitality events. So I was thinking at the time I wanted to do like conventions and such. I did do an internship. I actually did 2 internships. So my first one was during my time at the community college. So that one was down here in Gulf Shores. It was at a vacation rental place, and I was pretty much in the office all day on phones booking vacation rentals, guest sales, is what it was actually called. But then when I was at the University of Alabama, I had to do another internship, and so I actually interned at a catering company during my time, and that was a lot of fun. We did everything from, different weddings to we would cater lunches for the mayor every week, different things like that. So I really, really enjoyed that. But I had to do a project, and one of the projects I did was actually planning a convention. So at the time, I thought I wanted to do conventions, and I had my heart set on the Opryland Hotel and Convention Center in Nashville. I have family that live close by there as well. But oddly enough, a month before I got ready to graduate college, Nashville had this crazy out of nowhere flood. Like everything flooded. Opryland was one of the things that flooded, and so it shut down. And I got ready. I was getting ready to graduate college, and I had a friend reach out to me that was working down here at the beach club. I went to high school with her. She told me, she was like, "Hey, I know it's not really with your degree, but we're looking for a spa receptionist down here." I told her, I was like, well, I said, I am looking for a job. I'm moving back home. So, hey, it's a job. I'll take it, because unfortunately I had steadily been trying to apply for jobs and positions, but I got a lot of things back from people that, hey, like I know you're getting the degree, but I just didn't have the experience that anyone was looking for. So at this point, it was close enough. I knew that, I was moving back home. So I was like, I needed some type of job. So I graduated and got my bachelor's degree from Alabama. And then a week later moved home. I started down here at the beach club as a spa receptionist. So I worked that summer through the spa until about November of that year. The spa kind of slowed down. So then I moved to another department here on property, which is our clubhouse. So I kind of handled, that's where like the fitness center is, the indoor pool, different things like that. So I kind of handled those facilities, greeting guests, memberships. We do have members that come on. So I kind of did that. And then that February, there was a job posting that was for an activities supervisor. And so when I looked at this, though, that was when it was more, I realized what we would call more the recreational side. So it was activity supervisor, but it was someone to oversee their daily, like at the time, there was a kids club here, and just their daily activities as far as, different crafts and recreational things. Also, booking live music and stuff. So I was like, okay, I was like, well, it's not exactly what I studied in school, but it's kind of close. I felt like the things that I had studied would be relevant. So I went ahead and applied for it, and I got the position. And then I steadily moved up. I went from supervisor to assistant manager to manager, all within like a year. And then 15 years later, I am here. So I kind of winged it at first. Like I said, I had no clue. So as far as the backside, the managerial side of things, it was a lot of things that I learned in school. So a lot of that was the same as far as budgeting and things like that. I just kind of had to learn more of and do research, I guess, basically. Okay, well, what do kids like? I had to learn some of the trends because at the time I didn't have, kids myself. So I kind of had to research and, figure out the trends and kind of, what they'd want to do. And so there for a while, the first few years, it was kind of like, flying by, the edge of my seat. And then we steadily started working in, getting, activities, more quality activities. About 3 years later, well, I guess it would have been 2 years later. And then in 2013, I actually attended my first, at the time it was still RCRA. So I attended my first RCRA conference in 2013 because I had met at the time when I started here, Miss Kate Price Howard. She was the one that was actually working with my boss to get the interns in the summer. So luckily she suggested to my boss is like, hey, Ashton really needs to go to this conference. And so 2013 went to my first conference, and that was really beneficial. I was able to network a lot, reach out and kind of see what other resorts were doing too, and to get ideas. And then steadily from there, just, kind of growing it every year. It's my goal. We have a lot of repeat guests here. And so we will keep the most popular things to kind of have year after year. But every year it's my goal. I always try to add a few new things on just to, just to keep surprise, I guess, for those repeat. And also a lot of things are, to keep up with the trends. A lot of things too, I like every year that we get in summer interns. So, these are fresh, college interns. So I like to kind of pick their brain. I make all of them do special projects. And that helps a lot too, having the younger generation now come in as well, to slowly like keep evolving in there. But this is something out there, telling everyone kind of our origin stories, how we started. I originally started out, thinking I wanted to be a travel agent. But back then, it was something, travel agents didn't make a lot of money. It wasn't guaranteed money. And so, I kind of went with the hospitality field, and then, don't get discouraged and don't be afraid to try something new. Like with me, like I said, it was like one obstacle after another. But then I just did, what I had to do. And then eventually, something fell in my lap. And although, this opportunity, I had no clue what recreational activity was, activities, I went along with it. And, it worked out for the best. And now looking back on it, I honestly feel like I am happier in this position than I would have been if I took a position doing conventions, meetings, any of that stuff. Because it's ever changing with this, it's fun. We're in the field of fun. I think the other path, for me would be more, it's more office, more cutthroat, more serious. So, and then also, the recreational side, we get to change. I know here in our area, so we have, we have like January and February, we have our what we call our snowbirds down here. So we focus our activities on more like senior citizen, adult friendly things. Those guests are here for like a month at a time. So we're also able to do, like, I do trips with them and a lot of things we can't do with our vacation crowd. And then in March, typically we start our spring break. So we start more of our poolside or kid activities, things like that. And then we roll into summer. So we keep that aspect of it. But then we also are able to add on what we call our village lawn. So then we also add on evening activities and a whole different other set of activities. And then we have the fall, which is kind of more goes back into spring, but it's like all throughout the year it steadily changes. So I'm not always doing the same exact thing. But yeah, also like too, if I had to give one, advice to someone, like I said, don't be scared to try something, even though it might not be exactly what you think you're looking for. Because in the end, it may work out that you find out that there was a reason things didn't work out, and the path that you took, you may it may be more beneficial for you, or you may be happier at it, in the end than what you were.
All right. Thank you, Ashton. I just love listening to her story too, especially because she too wasn't sure where she wanted to go in the industry, and she was going to start out on a completely different path. And I just found her to be very fearless and just so open to learning and trying new different things. And she's been quite successful, and I admire her for that. What stood out to me in each of these stories is that there is no one path to success in recreation, just like there's no one way to make an impact. Whether you're just starting out or have been in the industry for years, the skills you build, the people that you connect with, and the passion that you bring, that's what makes a difference. So, thank you to Steve, Alex, and Ashton again for your time and sharing your stories. And thank you to those of you that are currently listening to this special episode of the RecNet Roundtable. If you found inspiration in these stories, share this episode with someone who might need a reminder that their path matters too. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep creating experiences that matter.